Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western Literary Canon out loud. Today we are completing the rest of Journal Collection number 36, obviously by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and our series of reading his journals. And we are up to 1845, and we will start with his entry. It's not a specific date, but it's a subject. It's called economy, and I'll start from there. Economy. Nobody need stir hand or foot. The custom of the country will do it all. Croisements. Symbols. The seashore and the taste of two metals in contact, and our enlarged powers in the presence of a friend. The poem must be tenex propositi. The fable or myth must hold, or it is worth no man's while to read it. If a pilot swings his vessel from the wharf with one intention, and after letting go changes his intention, and a vessel, deceived by his first demonstrations, is run affront of and injured, the pilot loses his branch. Certainly we must hold the poet to as strict a law. Winter apples. The worst day is good for something. All that is not love is knowledge, and all that is not good today is a store laid up for the wants of distant days. Knowledge is the straight line. Wisdom is the power of the straight line, or the square. Virtue is the power of the square, or the solid. Thus my friend reads in The Cultivator on the method of planting and hoeing potatoes, where he follows a farmer hoeing along the row of potato hills. That is knowledge. At last he takes the hoe in his hands and hoes the hills, the first with care and heed, and pulls up every root of piper grass. As the day grows hot and the row is long, he says to himself, "This is wisdom. But one hill is like another. I have mastered the art. It is mere trifling to waste my strength in doing many times the same thing. Why should I hoe more?" And he desists. But the last lesson was still unlearned. The moral power lay in the continuance and fortitude in working against pleasure to the excellent end and conquering all opposition. He has knowledge, he has wisdom, but he has misused virtue, which he only acquires who endures routine and sweat and postponement of fancy to the achievement of a worthy end. Native Americans. I hate the narrowness of the Native American party. It is the dog in the manger. It is precisely opposite to all the dictates of love and magnanimity, and therefore, of course, opposite to true wisdom. Man is the most composite of all creatures. Well, as in the old burning of the temple at Corinth, by the melting and intermixture of silver and gold and other metals, a new compound, more precious than any, called the Corinthian brass, was formed. So in this continent, asylum of all nations, the energy of Irish, Germans, Swedes, Poles, and Cossacks, and all the European tribes, of the Africans and of the Polynesians, will construct a new race, a new religion, a new state, a new literature, which will be as vigorous as the new Europe which came out of the smelting pot of the Dark Ages, or that which earlier emerged from the Pelasgic and Etruscan barbarism. Then there's an untranslated Latin phrase. Swedenborg's theology does well as long as it is repeated to and by those who are wont to accept something positive. But when I hear it, I say, "This is nothing to me. This is the excess of form." The fallacy seems to be in the equivocal use of the term "the Word." In the high and sacred sense of that term used by a strong Oriental rhetoric for the energy of the supreme cause in act, all that is predicated of it is true. It is equivalent to reason. But this being granted, theologians shift the word from this grand sense to signify a written sentence of St. Matthew or St. John, and instantly assume for this wretched written sentence all that was granted to be true of the divine reason. Swedenborg perceived the central life of each object, and saw the change of appearance as it passed before different eyes. He does not seem to have seen with equal clearness the necessity of progression or onwardness in each creature. Metamorphosis is the law of the universe. All forms are fluent, and as the bird alights on the bough and pauses for rest, then plunges into the air again on its way, so the thoughts of God pause but for a moment in any form, but pass into a new form, as if by touching the earth again in burial to acquire new energy. A wise man is not deceived by the pause. He knows that it is momentary. He already foresees the new departure, and departure after departure in long series. Dull people think they have traced the matter far enough if they have reached the history of one of these temporary forms, which they describe as fixed and final. A man should not be rich by having what is superfluous, but by having what is essential to him, like a manufacturer or engineer or astronomer who has a great capital invested in his costly apparatus. How to animate all his possessions? If he have any not animated by his quality and energy, let him sell them and convert them into things nearer to his nature. Such a rich man excites no envy. He has no more than he needs or uses. Timing. Quote, unseasonable love is like hate. Socrates in Stobaeus. Quote, all things are good and fair to those things wherewith they agree, but ill and deformed in respect of those things which they agree not. Socrates from Xenophon Memorabilia. Quote, what is strength? The motion of the soul with the body. Socrates in Stobaeus. Philosophy. Unity or identity and variety, the poles of philosophy. It makes haste to develop these two. A too rapid unity or unification and a too exclusive devotion to parts are the Scylla and Charybdis. A too rapid unity. Yes, for a wise skepticism, a long secular patience that delays and still delays the premature summation is rewarded with truth, perhaps in another sphere and cycle. This rashness or partiality is one vice. The other is confusion, or the misplacing the properties of the planes or spheres of nature. And the mind describes deity by simple purification of its own self. Indian mythology creates nature from the parts of the human body, a gigantic crystal. Every man who would do anything well must come to it from a higher ground, and a philosopher must be much more than a philosopher. Plato must be a poet. Rachel. But Rachel possesses a certain demoniacal power which is worthy of wonder. You feel in her veiled and nowise resonant voice, in her measured and earnest acting, and in her majestic delivery, that she is incessantly brooding on this inward raging fire, but this bursts up at decisive moments. Editor's note. Here follow extracts from the Vishnu Purana. End note. There were Swedenborgs in those days, Missouriums, mastodons of literature, not to be measured by a whole population of modern scholars. Every genius is defended from approval by great quantities of the unavailableness, good only for himself. What property, says the hungry mind as it sees it afar, and swims toward it as a fish to its food. Jones Very is like the rain plentiful. He does not love individuals. He is annoyed by edge. He likes only community, and he likes the lowness also, if it be community. I like sharp slats. Strength is wonderful. Some men think their goodness made of themselves. Others think the reverse. See the Indian self. Days. Every age has its object and symbol, and every man. Why not, then, every epoch of our life its own? And a man should journey through his own zodiac of signs. The Indian woman burns herself on her husband's funeral pile because she believes in transmigration, and being born again, if faithful in a form not less than the last, retains enough memory to find her husband in his new form, though a dog or a jackal or a wolf, and by affectionate speech recalls to him also his memory and exhorts him to divest his present unworthy weeds. In the long rotation, by fidelity, they meet again in worthy forms. The flame of the funeral pile is cool to the widow. To this practical doctrine of migration we have nothing corresponding. Ours is sentimental and literary. Indian mythology, a lace veil. Clouds of legends, but the old form seen through. We should infer a country of sages and devotees, but there seems no relation between the book and the actual population. One thing marks it all, the fate and the character. As soon as they confront each other, victory is declared without a struggle. It is by posts, not battles. Sensible people, it is said, are selfish. Sensuous are. In India, king, courtier, god are represented as making the most romantic sacrifices, kingdom, goods, life itself, for knowledge and spiritual power. In France, wit, science, personality counts for more than in England. In England, possession in every kind counts for more than person. Lycurgus, Pythagoras, Plato, all poets, all women believe in the plasticity or education of man, but the Whig world is very incredulous. October 27th. In this finest of all Indian summer days, it seems sad that each of us can only spend it once. We sigh for the thousand heads and thousand bodies of the Indian gods, that we might celebrate its immense beauty in many ways and places, and absorb all its good. Trace these colossal conceptions of Buddhism and of Vedantism home, and they are always the necessary or structural action of the human mind. Buddhism, read literally, the tenet of fate, worship of morals, or the tenet of freedom, are the unalterable originals in all the wide variety of geography, language, and intelligence of the human tribes. The buyer thinks he has a new article, but if he goes to the factory, there is the self-same old loom as before, the same mordants and colors, the same blocks even, but by a little splicing and varying the parts of all patterns, what passes for new is produced. Fate. The Indian system is full of fate, the Greek not. The Greek uses the word, indeed, but in his mind the fates are three respectable old women who spin and shear a symbolic thread. So narrow, so limitary is the sphere allowed them, and it is with music. We are only at a more beautiful opera, or at private theatricals. But in India it is the dread reality, it is the cropping out in our planted gardens of the core of the world. It is the abysmal force, untamable and immense. They who wrestle with Hari see their doom in his eye before the fight begins. As for King Swedenborg, I object to his cardinal position in morals that evils should be shunned as sins. I hate preaching. I shun evils as evils. Does he not know, Charles Lamb did, that every poetic mind is a pagan, and to this day prefers Olympian Jove, Apollo, and the Muses and the Fates, to all the barbarous indigestion of Calvin in the Middle Ages? Great king is King Swedenborg. I will not deny him his matchless length and breadth. Such a world of mathematics, metallurgy, astronomy, anatomy, ecclesiastic history, theology, demonology, Orionology, love, fear, form, terror, law, all come out of that quiet, sleepy old gentleman with a gold-headed cane, lodging at Mr. Shearsmith's. As for, shunning evils as sins, I prefer the ethics of the Vishnu. See beyond. Too much form, O Swedenborg, too many steps, too much dogma, too much government. We are very clumsy writers of history. We tell the chronicle of parentage, birth, and when we have come to an end of this external history, the reader is no whit instructed, no ray of relation appears between all this lumber and the goddess born. My dear friend, Standing on his mountains of facts, whose strata, chemistry, meteors, landscape, countries, laws, meridian, magnetism, and what not he knows, asks me how all goes with me, floating in obscure questions, musing on this and that metaphysical riddle. Well, it is even so. I stay where I can, and am peaceful and satisfied enough as long as no sentinel challenges me. I use no election of the questions that occupy me. No doubt I should feel a limitation if I were wont to ask myself for men, or to compute in any manner of political economy my day's work, but well assured that this questioner who brings me so many problems will bring the answers also in due time. Very rich, very patient, cheerful giver that he is, he shall have it all his own way for me. Amalgam. The absolutist is good and blessed, though he dies without the sight of that paradise he journeys after, and he can forgive the earthworms who remain immersed in matter, and know not felicities he seeks. But not so well can he dispose of the middleman who receives and assents to his theories, and yet, by habit and talent formed to live in the existing order, builds and prospers among the worldly men, extending his affection and countenance all the time to the absolutists. Ah, thou evil, two-faced half and half, how can I forgive thee? Evil, evil hast thou done. Thou it is that confoundest all distinctions. If thou didst not receive the truth at all, thou couldst do the cause of virtue no harm. But now the men of selfishness say to the absolutist, Behold this man, he has all thy truth, yet lo, he is with us and ours. Ah, thou damnable half and half, choose, I pray you, between God and the Whig party, and do not longer strew sugar on this bottled spider. Yes, but Confucius, glory of the nations, Confucius, sage of the absolute East, was a middleman. He is the Washington of philosophy, the moderator, and then there's an untranslated two ancient Greek words here, of modern history. Also, this is not anybody's choice, but this double sympathy is born. This hated amalgam comes into the world, and natural and supernatural power. The doctrine of the triform came from India, as did the poetic horror that the demons in hell had that tremendous power of vision, that they saw through all intermediate regions and worlds the great and happy gods moving in heaven, whilst the heavenly souls were also made to know their own felicity by discovering the infernal spaces. Quote, What living creature slays or is slain? What living creature preserves or is preserved? Each is his own destroyer or preserver, as he follows evil or good. Vishnu Purana. Editor's note. The following extract from the Vishnu Purana was the origin of the Hamatreya in the poems, its title being evidently another form of the word Maitreya in this version. End note. Quote, The words I and mine constitute ignorance. Quote, I have now given you a summary account of the sovereigns of the earth, these and other kings who with perishable frames have possessed this ever-enduring world, and who blinded with deceptive notions of individual occupation have indulged the feeling that suggests, quote, This earth is mine, it is my son's, it belongs to my dynasty, have all passed away. So many who reigned before them, many who succeeded them, and many who are yet to come have ceased or will cease to be. Earth laughs as if smiling with autumnal flowers to behold her kings unable to effect the subjugation of themselves. I will repeat to you, Maitreya, the stanzas that were chanted by Earth, and which the Muni Asita communicated to Janaka, whose banner was virtue. Quote, How great is the folly of princes who are endowed with the faculty of reason, to cherish the confidence of ambition when they themselves are but foam upon the wave. Before they have subdued themselves, they seek to reduce their ministers, their servants, their subjects under their authority. Then they endeavor to overcome their foes. Quote, Thus, say they, Will we conquer the ocean-circled earth, and intent upon their project, behold not death, which is not far off. But what mighty matter is the subjugation of the sea-girt earth to one who can subdue himself? Emancipation from existence is the fruit of self-control. It is through infatuation that kings desire to possess me, whom their predecessors have been forced to leave, whom their fathers have not retained. Beguiled by the selfish love of sway, fathers contend with their sons, and brothers with brothers for my possession. Foolishness has been the character of every king who has boasted, "All this earth is mine, everything is mine, it will be in my house forever," for he is dead. How is it possible that such vain desires should survive in the hearts of his descendants, who have seen their progenitor absorbed by the thirst of dominion, compelled to relinquish me, whom he called his own, and tread the path of dissolution? When I hear a king sending word to another by his ambassador, "This earth is mine, resign your pretensions to it," I am at first moved to violent laughter, but it soon subsides to pity for the infatuated fool. These were the verses of Maitreya, which earth recited, and by listening to which ambition fades away like snow before the sun. Fooled thou must be, the wisest of the wise, then be thou fool of virtue, not of vice. The Indian teaching, through its cloud of legends, has yet a simple and grand religion, like a queenly countenance seen through a rich veil. It teaches to speak the truth, love others as yourself, and to despise trifles. The East is grand, and makes Europe appear the land of trifles. Identity, identity, friend and foe are of one stuff. Cheerful and noble is the genius of this cosmogony. Wisdom consists in keeping the soul liquid, or in resisting the tendency to too rapid petrifaction. There are people who are always in fashion, and style and fashion in aristocracy bends and fits itself to them, denies itself to be possessed of them. One said, "If the hand had not been divided into fingers, man would still be a beast roaming in the desert." The like if the tongue had not been fitted for sharp articulation. Children cry and scream and stamp with fury, unable to express their desires. "I judge by each man's truth of his degree of understanding," said Chesterfield. It is ever thus. The progress is to accuracy, to skill, to truth from blind force. The men of whom we are to speak are all uplifted to this elevation of civility. Happy in this, happy the period in which this truly human force reaches its perfect extent and has not yet gone over into fineness and an excessive thought for surfaces. There must be the abyss, nox, and chaos, out of which all come, and they must never be far off. Cut off the connection between any of our works, and this dread origin and the work is shallow and unsatisfying. That is the strength and excellence of the people, that they lean on this, and the mob is not quite so bad an argument as we are apt to represent it, for it has this divine side. There is a moment in the history of every nation when, proceeding out of this brute youth, the perceptive powers reach with delight their greatest strength, and have not yet become microscopic, so that the man at the instant extends across the entire scale, and with his feet still planted on the immense forces of night, converses by his eyes and brain with solar and stellar creation. That is the moment of perfect health, the culmination of their star of empire. Ah, let the twilight linger. We love the morning spread abroad among the mountains, but too fast comes on the broad noon blaze, only exposing the poverty and barrenness of our globe, the listlessness and meanness of its inhabitants. Montaigne or Socrates would quote Paul of Tarsus and Goody Two-Shoes with equal willingness. Editor's note: In the autumn, Mr. Emerson seems to have been arranging with a Boston publishing house for the printing of the poems of his friend William Ellery Channing. In the later months of the year and during the winter, as happened thereafter during the rest of his active life, he lectured before literary societies or lyceums in cities, towns, or villages, first in New England and New York, but soon farther west. He was invited to give an anti slavery lecture in Salem, and probably did so. During the summer, he had prepared the course on representative men, and the Napoleon attracted a special attention. He spoke before the Boston Lyceum in the same course with J. R. Lowell, Dr. S. G. Howe, Caleb Cushing, and others, also in Cambridge, Salem, and Lowell. End note. November 5th. Yesterday evening saw Robert Owen at Mr. Alcott's. His 4 elements are production, distribution, formation of character, and local and general governing. His 3 errors, on which society has always been based, and is now, are 1. That we form ourselves, 2. That we form our opinions, 3. That we form our feelings, and the 3 truths with which he wishes to replace these are 1. That we proceed from a creating power, 2. That our opinions come from conviction, 3. That our feelings come from our instincts. The 5 evils which proceed from our 3 errors, and which make the misery of life, are 1. Religious perplexities, 2. Disappointment in affections, 3. Pecuniary difficulties, 4. Intemperance, 5. Anxiety for offspring. He also requires a transitional state. Fourier he saw in his old age. Fourier learned of him all the truth he had, and the rest of his system was imagination, and the imagination of a banker. You are very external with your evils, Mr. Owen. Let me give you some real mischiefs. Living for show, losing the whole in the particular, indigence of vital power. I am afraid these will appear in a phalanstery or in a tub. We were agreed that Mr. Owen was right in imputing despotism to circumstances, and that the priest and poet are right in attributing responsibility to men. Owen was a better man than he knew, and his love of men made us forget his 3 errors. His charitable construction of men, classes, and their actions was invariable. He was always a better Christian in his controversy with Christians, and he interpreted with great generosity the acts of the Holy Alliance and Prince Metternich. Ah, he said, you may depend on it, there are as tender hearts and as much good will to serve men in palaces as in cottages. The Owen and Fourier plans bring no a priori convictions. They are come at merely by counting and arithmetic. All the fine apurcas are for individualism. The Spartan broth, the hermit's cell, the lonely farmer's life are poetic. The phalanstery, the quote-unquote self-supporting village, Owen are culinary and mean. There seems to be a certain vegetable principle pervading human nature also, or perhaps better, a vital power which the vegetable life illustrates, which cannot be too much respected. It appears as if a good work did itself, as if whatever is good, in proportion as it is good, had a certain self-existence and self-creation or organism. The good book grows whether the writer is awake or asleep. Its subject and order are not chosen, but pre-appointed him. I find it quoted from Livy, quote, that the moment a man begins not to be convinced, he begins to convince. I had another experience in the coach, if I can recall it, that the reasons why a man becomes intellectual and shuns practice is reverential and religious, because action is so melancholy. Manliness seems to require something better than this desultoriness, and as if out of respect and courtesy to the world, we withdraw from noise. Skepticism has no such good argument as the irreligion of facts. We do not approach a man's house by his woodshed and offices, but through his park and portico. Skepticism engulfs of skepticism, strongest of all that of saints. They come to the mount, and in the largest and most blissful communication to them, somewhat is left unsaid, which begets in them doubt and horrible doubt. So then, says they, before they have yet risen from their knees, even this does not satisfy. We must still feel that this, our homage and beatitude, is partial and deferred. We must fly for relief and sanity to that other suspected and reviled part of nature, the kingdom of the understanding, the gymnastics of talent, the play of fancy. Greeley surprises by playing all the parts, only possible in America. Swedenborg. He reminds me again and again of our Jones Very, who had an illumination that enabled him to excel everybody in wit, and to see farthest in every company, and quite easily to bring the proudest to confusion, and yet he could never get out of his Hebraistic phraseology and mythology, and when all was over, still remained in the thin porridge or cold tea of Unitarianism. Influences. We are candidates, we know we are, for influences more subtle and more high than those of talent and ambition. We want a leader, we want a friend whom we have not seen. In the company and fired by the example of a God, these faculties that dream and toss in their sleep would wake. Where is the genius that shall marshal us the way that we are going? There is a vast residue, an open account ever. The great inspire us. How they beckon, how they animate, and show their legitimate power in nothing more than their power to misguide us. For the perverted great derange and deject us, and perplex ages with their fame. Alexander, Napoleon, Mohammed, then the evil genius of France, at and before the Revolution, a learned fiend. It is the largest part of a man that is not inventoried. He has many innumerable parts. He is social, professional, political, sectarian, literary, and is this or that set in corporation. But after the most exhausting census has been made, there remains as much more which no tongue can tell, and this remainder is that which interests. This is that which the strong genius works upon, the region of destiny, of aspiration, of the unknown. Ah, they have a secret persuasion that as little as they pass for in the world, they are immensely rich in expectancy and power. Nobody has ever yet dispossessed this adhesive self to arrive at any glimpse or guess of the awful life that lurks under it. Far the best part, I repeat, of every mind is not that which he knows, but that which hovers and gleams, suggestions, tantalizing, unpossessed before him. His firm, recorded knowledge soon loses all interest for him. But this dancing chorus of thoughts and hopes is the quarry of his future, is his possibility, and teaches him that his man's life is of a ridiculous brevity and meanness, but that it is his first age and trial only of his young wings, but that vast revolutions, migrations, and gears on gears in the celestial societies invite him. Inward miracles, deliverances. That which so mightily annoyed and hampered us ceases utterly and at unawares. We wist not how or whence the redemption came. What so rankled at heart and kept the eyes open all night, and which we said will never down, lo, we have utterly forgot it, cannot by any effort of memory realize it again and give it importance. The crises on our history come so. Thus they steal in on us, a new life which enters, God knows how, through the solidest blocks of our old thoughts and mental habits, makes them transparent and pervious to its subtle essence, sweetens and enlightens all, and at last dissolves them in its new radiance. The miracles of the Spirit are greater than those of the history. Men also representative. Swedenborg and Behmen saw that things were representative. They did not sufficiently see that men were. But we cannot, as we say, be in two places at once. My doing my office entitles me to the benefit of your doing yours. This is the secret after which the communists are coarsely and externally striving. Work in thy place with might and health, and thy secretion to the spiritual body is made. I and mine will do the like, thus imperceptibly and most happily, genially and triumphantly doing what we delight in. Behold, we are communists, brothers, members of one another. We are invited to an intellectual banquet, to a society of thought with them, the great men. We see them as illustrations, incarnate and beautiful, of the laws walking and speaking, but the direct service they render us is that of health, and is above the region of thought and will. Shakespeare's fault that the world appears so empty. He has educated you with his painted world, and this real one seems a huckster's shop. Every work needs a necessity, a nature, a material already existing, for motive to the poet and for credence to the people. Otherwise the work were fantastic. A man does not get up some fine morning and say, I am full of life. Lo, I will build a cathedral. Dear heart, take it sadly home to thee that there will and can be no cooperation. The other part of life is self-reliance. Love and it balance up and down, and the beam never rests. Thou wouldst fain not look out of the window, nor waste time in expecting thy friend. Thou wouldst be sought of him. Well, that also is in thy soul, and this is its law. The soul of man must be the servant of another. In its good estate, it is the servant of the Spirit of truth. When it is abandoned to that dominion, it is great and sovereign, and draweth friends and lovers. When it is not so, it serveth a friend or lover. The other and third thing is this, that it is ever well with him who finishes his work for its own sake, and the state in the world is happy that has the most of such finishers. The world will do justice to such. It cannot otherwise, but never on the day when the work is newly done and presented, but forever it is true that every man settles his own rate. Traveling. Our education in Latin and Greek really mortgages us to Italy and entitles us to go. Not so, if we had a commanding idea which concatenates our readings and doings. But we have not. Why should we say we have? If you are abandoned to your genius and employment, be it never so special and rare as engraving or painting, men will do you justice and not reproach you that you do not plough. The language is made. Who has not helped to make it? Then comes Milton, Shakespeare, and find it all made to their hand, and use it as if there never had been language before. This is the end of Emerson's journal collection number 36, dating from the year 1845, when the author was 42 years old. Thank you for listening.